The journey for Kenya and the private sector investment in the energy sector started, was a long journey. There was some preparations carried out by way of comprehensive reforms which were implemented between 1993 and 2000 in accordance with an energy sector policy framework papers. These were comprehensive reforms whose objectives were to enhance operational efficiency and attract private sector investment in power generation. Let's move to the next slide, please. It was expected that the private sector participation would create competition in the generation function, which was predominantly dominated by one publicly owned company, KenGen, and to improve operational efficiency, and more fundamentally to complement government investment in the power generation, and those funds will then be used in other sectors which were not attractive to private sector investment. The next slide, please. The reforms which were implemented was first to separate the commercial functions from policies, setting, and regulatory functions. In this, I mean that government owns some generation assets and transmission assets, and government had to stop being a player, and so that government was going to focus on policy setting. In addition to that, the commercial functions were to be purely run on commercial basis, and a regulatory function was to be created to regulate the sector independent from the government. As a result of this, the government had to transfer power assets which they owned, and those power assets, the generation assets owned by government, were consolidated in one company, KenGen, and the transmission and distribution assets, whether owned by government or other regional development bodies, were all consolidated and transferred to KPOC, which is a distribution and transmission company. Next slide, please. In addition to that, the generation function was unbundled from transmission and distribution functions. Then KenGen, which was the generating company, was to undertake generation function. KPOC was to undertake transmission and distribution functions, and the two companies were required to operate on commercial basis under a power purchase agreement. Next, please. In addition to that, there were changes in law. The Electric Power Act 1997 was enacted. This established the power sector regulator, the Electricity Regulatory Board, and the Electricity Regulatory Board's mandate was to set retail tariffs. Before, the government used to set retail tariffs, and also the regulator was also to approve power purchase agreements between KPOC and the other generating companies. Next. In addition to that, the other reform implemented was that all power generation projects and all transmission projects were to be implemented on the basis of an approved national least power development plan. That means that the country had to start planning on a long term for the implementation and for the development of power projects and transmission projects. Next. Okay, this table shows since 1997 the number of independent power producers who have invested in the energy sector in Kenya. There are 10 of them. 5 are already in operation. If we could move to the next slide. And 5 other projects, either they have either reached financial close or are just about there. So they are 10 in number. But the most important thing about this is that I spoke about complementing government resources. Over the same period, the public generating company, KenGen, has also been developing a number of other projects. The projects so far developed by the private sector, or the ones which are committed to be developed by the private sector, their capacity is 45 megawatts. What KenGen has developed over the period is about 660 megawatts, which then means that the objective of complementarity, complementing the government investment in the power generation has actually been realized. Let's move to the next one. The next one, please. Next. In addition to the 10 listed projects, there are some other 4 mini hydro projects which have come in through the feed-in tariff. Okay, I now wanted to address the issue of what criterion do we use as a country and also as an off-taker in implementing projects, and what do we do to be able to decide what project is to be developed by KenGen and what project is to be developed by independent power producers. We have a 20-year list cost power development plan that lists the power capacity that is required, the technology type, and the year that is required. Then this list cost power development plan is updated annually. And the update of the list cost power development plan is spearheaded by the sector regulator. The government and KenGen then agree on the projects which are best developed by KenGen based on the government's ability to provide support and also KenGen's financial capability and also technical capacity. Next. Then the other projects which are found best developed by the private sector, KPOC is then required to procure the investors to develop the plans. In this, as an observation, it's notable that most of the geothermal and hydro projects have tended to be developed by KenGen, because our experience when you go to tender for them is that they tend to attract very, very low interest from private sector. Next, please. Nevertheless, because one of the major issues that we have come to see as being a limiting factor on the geothermal, and Kenya has a potential of about 10,000 megawatts of geothermal. That presents the largest natural resource for Kenya in terms of electricity, and which is least cost for Kenya, is that unless we invest in field appraisal to ascertain the field capacity, that is the capacity of the steam, it is very difficult for a private investor to take that risk. So to be able to do that and to be able to pave way for more competition in the exploitation and development of geothermal resource, the government has created a state-owned geothermal company purely to carry out geothermal exploration and to develop the steam, which then means that very soon we'll be going out to the market to invite private sector, and also KenGen at that point also can participate for the conversion of the steam to electricity. Let's move on. The next one, please. The other criteria that we use to make a decision on what projects are to be developed by the private sector is situations where we have to bridge power capacity gaps. There are delays usually experienced in the development of projects which are planned in the risk cost power development plan, and at that point, then a decision can be made and has been made in the past to invite private sector to bring in capacity that can be implemented in a short period of time. And as a result of this has been why we have been procuring the medium speed diesels to serve a medium term purpose. Let's next slide, please. Next.